Well, welcome everybody back to another Saturday edition of Invisible InCourage Live. We're so thrilled that you are here today and really excited about an amazing time today. And I want to talk about our guest a little bit. So have you ever had a misstep in your life which made you want to call for a do-over? Do you wish you could be more resilient with the tough challenges of life? And I know so many of you, tough challenges are every day. Do you desire to make a greater impact on the world? Who doesn't, man? We want to make a difference. Our guest is Gulf War Army veteran, a 4-time track and field All-American, and a 2-time Olympic trials qualifier. However, one misstep in life ended both his sports and military career. Since his injury, he has advised 3 U.S. Secretaries of State, won the long jump silver medal in Sydney, founded the United States Olympic Committee's Paralympic Military Sports Program, which helps wounded, ill, and injured service members use sports as a tool for rehabilitation. Please welcome our long jump silver medalist, 2 times TEDx speaker, and homemade waffle lover, Mr. John Register.
Wayne, do not forget the waffles. Never forget the waffles, Wayne.
Oh, man.
Of champions.
I don't think I'm allowed to even have those much anymore.
I am a connoisseur.
Oh, I'm going to have to come down. I'm
going to have syrup and waffles, butter, pats, all that stuff. Yeah, got to have it.
Oh, that's awesome. So I'll tell you what, really tell us about your journey. I'd love to, first let's start kind of back a little bit in the beginning. Let's talk about your military experience and maybe even what led you to want to go into the military and kind of talk a little bit about that.
Well, with the military, we always, everybody says thanks for your service. And we say, yes, that's great. But usually most of us are running from something or running to something and we get in. And for me, I had just graduated the University of Arkansas and had been a 4-time All-American there and went to 1 Olympic trials. And I wanted to continue. And the Army had, and still has, a world-class athlete program, which allows a soldier to train for about 3 to 4 years prior to the next Olympic Games. And so I really went in to try to make that program. There were no guarantees. I had to make my own route for it, but I did make it. And on the way to my training destination, to Presidio, San Francisco, Operation Desert Shield, Desert Storm came up, and I was diverted to the Gulf War. Wow. So that's how I got in the military. And I tell you what, Wayne, I absolutely loved it. I didn't know anything about the military, about the service branches. And in the Army, I found out that I could, make rank, when I qualified for another level of opportunity, that, I was celebrated to do that. And I just loved it. Want to be, we call it a lifer in the military. So that's how I got into that. And then we, of course, had an accident which changed the entire world around.
So tell me you talked about that you went into athletics. What did you do? I mean, what were you good at?
Yeah, so I graduated with a degree in communications. Okay. And I picked a career field where I could actually, use that degree, at least as somewhat of semblance that I had. Sure. So I enlisted, and because I could maneuver around better, and then I took the officer selection battery, qualified for officer candidate school. But my job was really in communications. It was the hardwire things of a RAT rig, we call it, radio and teletype rig. This is a vehicle that has a big case on the back of it with this huge antenna that comes up, which shoots out 50,000 watts of power every time you key the microphone. So don't touch the antenna when you key the mic, right? Because it will fry you. And I began to understand how communication works from the practical side of making sure that messages are heard both ways, right? From the sender to the receiver and back again, and everything that can interfere with that in between.
Yeah, that wouldn't be good in the military to send mixed signals, right?
Absolutely. But we see how that works in life right now, right? We see how mixed signals come all the time, especially when we're talking about people with invisible disabilities. Because in that same framework, there's these mixed signals that go out because a person communicates in one way and it's not received on the other end as the same way that it goes out. So there's something that's happening with that signal. So that's a great point. And the expertise then became really tactical satellites. So it was a skill identifier, Victor 9, which was tactical satellite training. And I was on the kind of on the cusp of what we have with our cell phone technology right now, and mapping that we have. Like when you have your MapQuest out and your cell phone GPSs you to different locations. Well, I was on the cusp of that in the military, putting those things together as we maneuvered in Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm. So it was amazing. That was in part in line with all of that new technology. And then when I came back from the war, I went to Presidio, was dismal in the high hurdles was my specialty. And I cried for a moment. I kind of lost everything. Couldn't run under 14 seconds anymore. And I ran a quarter mile, which is one time around the track.
Sure.
2.5 in Reno, Nevada, at the indoor track. And I ran under 47 seconds in that 2.5 lap quarter mile. My coach said, wow, we're dumping the high hurdles. We're going to the 400-meter hurdles. You don't have any to say about it. And after that, I qualified for the Olympic trials, qualified for the Olympic Games. You have to be top 3 for the Americans to make the team. And then I finished up 17th in those Olympic trials in New Orleans, Louisiana. So that was great. And then I was on my way to try to make it. USA Track and Field News had picked me to be in the top 3 at the 1996 Olympic trials. But on May 17, 1994, my entire life would change with one wrong step.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you, you talk about all that technology. I don't know if you know my background too. I used to manage Radio Shacks. I understand the technology, and my current job, I volunteer with running Invisible Disabilities. I actually work for Dish right now, right? Which is a satellite and company and stuff. So there's a lot in common. I would understand that, but communication is absolutely that critical thing. And a big part of it is, you think about people with invisible disabilities, is they try to share what they're going through with somebody, and they're communicating, hey, this is what the difficulties I'm going through in life. And then people disregard it by saying, oh yeah, I'm just tired too, or it's not a big deal or whatever. And you're like, well, wait a second, validate what somebody's really going through. And then they're like, then they don't want to necessarily talk about it. They want to feel like they're part of the human race, right? They're part of this whole thing that we got going on.
Yeah, I think, you make a great point with that, and people don't want to be seen. And we've seen it going on right now, in some of the protests and things that are going around the country, that people haven't been heard. And this is nothing that's new in that communication phase, right? We can take this all the way back to even before, but I'll mention one, is the Boston Tea Party. So there were people that were disgruntled with how they were being treated by Great Britain, and they decided to uprise, riot, and have those things going on back then. So this is nothing new in the play card. We have to make sure that when we're communicating, we know the different players in the game. Right. Because when, and keep the focal point on what is the focal point. So with people with disabilities, we want to make sure that people understand and know that I'm coming at you and sharing these things with you because I have a need for you to understand how we can work better together.
Yeah, exactly right. Because I always say, people will, I hear this phrase a lot. Well, my friend, all you ever want to do is talk about all the difficult things they're going through. And here's my response. You're not listening. If you would listen and say, you don't have to understand, because unless you've gone through it, I mean, I don't understand what you've gone through, because you'll share a little bit more about your accident and how that impacted your life. We'll talk a little bit about the whole aspect of being in war and how that impacts you as well, right? But we just need to start listening to people and sit down and say, what you're going through is real. Just because I can't see it doesn't mean it isn't, right?
Or have experienced it, right?
Right.
So it's just because I haven't experienced what you've experienced doesn't negate my experience,
right? Because
you haven't lived through that, or that was not your experience. So I can come with my thing. We can listen to each other. And like my daughter was saying earlier on our little show, she said, my mom always tells me, I know you're listening, but are you hearing me? Right? That's my mom. And we don't really hear and go to that other level of embracing somebody's truth of what they've experienced. Right. And we can do that. It's not hard to do, but it comes again with the noise that we have in our life that causes the interference. If there's that interference, it's harder for that signal to get through. And it's harder for people with invisible disabilities to actually cut through that chatter, because people either don't believe it, they don't see it, there's nothing that looks wrong with you, so therefore everything must be fine with you. And that's just not the case, and we have to continue to cut down that lane of chatter so that communication and that can get cut through to that, to who we're sending the message to, and we can get the feedback to come to us to make sure we're course corrected and know that we have been listened to and heard.
Well, I mean, think about it. I mean, you're a silver medalist. I'm not a silver medalist. I can't go. I mean, I ran quarter-mile track in high school, but I'll tell you what, hurdles, no way, not touching it, ain't going to go there. I watch the guys who run hurdles, like unbelievable stuff, right? And so, but some people in life, their hurdles are other things, right? And some people in life, that's their gold medal. The fact that 30 years later, they're still here fighting whatever they're going through. I mean, I think about that with my wife, with her MS and Lyme disease and PTSD and all these things. And I'll tell you, it's not about, always overcoming the odds. It's continuing on, right? And I think you really talk a lot about that. So tell us a little bit more about your injury, because I would think your injury, right, is you're like, oh, he's the guy's in the military, he was driving a Humvee and something happened. That's not what happened.
It's not what happened. And you brought out so many things I'm kind of unpacking my mind, with overcoming the adversity. And I really, because I'm a professional speaker now, and I almost got out of the game because I didn't have something I thought I was saying. And I'll come back to that in a moment on what we really overcome. What's the true thing that we overcome? Right. So on May 17th, 1994, I'm on the Army's World Class Athlete Program team. My life is set before me. USA Track and Field News has just picked me to be one of the top 3 hurdlers to make the United States Olympic team in 1996. The date's May 17, 1994. I'm also on my way to officer candidate school because I was boarded in Germany when I was living there at the time. And the selection board recommended me for officer candidate school. So I had all these things going. I'm going to do 20 years in the military. I'm going to get out, become a civilian, do another 20 years in the same job I was in. And boom, I'm going to travel the world for the rest of my life.
All right, got it all figured out.
All figured out. Go. And I went across a hurdle during a training session, landed awkwardly, severed my knee or hyperextended the knee, severed the artery behind the kneecap, the popliteal artery. And then about 7 days later, I was left with a choice. My doctor, Dr. Randy Mullins, came in and said, John, you can either keep your limb and use a walker or a wheelchair for the rest of your life, or I can amputate your leg and you can use a prosthesis for the rest of your life. And really, what kind of choice is that? Here I am,
choice, right? Yeah.
All-American. And so I started going into this negative mindset, not immediately, because I said, I know it has to be amputated, because the leg is pretty much useless by this time. It's going to be either fused straight out, and I understand, I was lucid enough to understand that. And I want to know kind of what was going to be my quality of life afterward, not really knowing what the quality of life would be after an amputation. So the amputation is done, and then I start going down the downward spiral. I start thinking, like many of us, who am I now? What's my identity?
Right.
Is my wife going to stick around? Is my son still going to see me as his father? Do I still have a job in the Army? Can I support my family? I mean, my Olympic dreams are over. Yep. So that was one. That was my fear, right? And then, so secondarily, I had friends who were trying to put me back into their box because they didn't know what to say. They wanted just to be everything to be fine.
Yeah.
And the friends, I frame it as other people who believe for us what we can or cannot do.
Exactly right.
Which is really based upon what they believe they could or could not do if they were in our situation.
Right.
So they try to pull us back into their world.
Yeah.
Right. And so the third one is what I was trying to overcome is societal stigma. Who told me that just because I'm an amputee now, that my wife is going to leave me, my son's not going to see me as his dad and value me, I'm going to lose my job in the Army, and all these negative thoughts that were hitting my head.
Right. And
I began to think, who am I allowing into this space? Because I realized that had I was thinking that the limb loss, if I didn't lose the leg, I wouldn't have all these issues that were going on. And I was thinking in some capacity, I was going to get it back. If I didn't overcome the amputation of my left leg, I would have my leg back. That was kind of the thought process that was in my head.
Sure.
But we don't get that back. And oftentimes we think we do.
Yeah.
And it might be a far-reaching notion in our head, like military service members. When I was building the military support program, all those guys and gals, anytime I went up there to the wards, the first thing they wanted to do with the triple amputee is, I want to get back in the fight. I just missed my unit. I got to get back and feeling like I need to help them.
Right.
right? So I let them sit with that. I don't say yes you can, no you can't.
Right.
I just say, you know, you can show up as however you want to show up. You got to figure that thing out for yourself. But in this process of rebuilding our lives, we're redefining who we are. Are we going to go back to the fears of ourselves, the fears of others, or the societal fears, or is there something greater on the other side?
Right.
And that something greater is only discovered. It's personal. You cannot get this in a book. I don't care how many books you read, you will not get this in a book.
Right.
You have to choose for yourself. Once you've identified what those fears are for you, you have to choose for yourself what it is in your life that you are willing to amputate to embrace that new normal mindset. They gave me choices about the amputation, but it was my decision. I had to make that choice, because if I tell somebody else you need to amputate and they do it and they say, well, that was the wrong decision, I'm blaming you for that.
Well, you know, our vision of our organization is that people would be invisible no more. And what that really means is that we would treat people the same and stop treating people like that person's lesser, right? Because that's what we do. We have this tendency in our mindset. Well, they can't do something and they're choosing not to do it. And so they're this, but in a lot of cases, they're unable to do it for some reason or another. And we got to stop saying that they don't have value anymore, right?
Yeah. And I think that's, for me, I think that's it's for the person that's going through it.
Right.
That's giving up too much power.
Yeah.
Because I'm on the other side now, right? So when I chose to amputate, I am now understanding it wasn't a rebuild at all. It's actually a rebirth. Change. I have to learn how to walk again. I have to learn how to run again. I have to learn how to exist in society again. But that produces a resolve in me. I'm so resolute in who I am. It's no longer for me to go back to what my friends were saying or what society says. Right. It's now time for them to catch up to where I am.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic, because I think about how strong people are that have lived with disability or lived with pain or those things for years after years. My goodness, spend 30 minutes with them and you're like going, oh my, you know, they've been through the battles you talk about. I mean, they have literally, they've been through the battles of the friends that said, you know, you're faking it, or the friends that said, you know what, your problem is you should get out and just run all, you know, that's your problem. Well, wait a second. It's really, like you said, it's up to the person. They need to know what they can do and can't do, right? Yeah. We don't have the choice. We can't be I call it the armchair doctor, and come along and say, well, you're not doing such and such, or you should be drinking this thing and it will solve all your problems. I mean, I can't imagine making a decision like you did, but you're like, you know, I mean, that's hard in your mind to go, okay, here's a decision. And then you think, okay, well, I've seen people that come back and they run Ironmans. They have, you know, they have prosthetics and they're doing all this crazy stuff. Well, but you know what? Some people don't run Ironmans that have prosthetics, right?
Like me, I don't run Ironman.
I know, but you know what I'm saying? No, I mean, we always think that that's the normal. And I have to say, the guy who climbs Mount Everest or the person who runs the Ironman, I'm sorry to say it, they're the abnormal. Okay, the rest of us are normal in a sense, right? Because the rest of us, each day life is throwing stuff. We're having to deal with this stuff, and sometimes it's illness, sometimes it's disability, sometimes it's trauma, right? I mean, you know, talk to me a little bit about being in the military and the whole aspect of PTSD, because I know you're a real passionate for the people in the military as well. Yeah. Talk a little bit about that.
So I think, you know, one thing I want to kind of drift off of is what you said around how people show up. Right. And there's a difference between empathy and sympathy.
Yeah.
And what you were describing, Wayne, was the sympathetic response. You know, I think you should be doing this. It's the same when I was going to the hospitals. You know, if I were to come in there and say, you can be a Paralympic medalist because you have these disabilities now, leap is way too great.
Right.
So the passion I have for these service members is, yes, they've served our country. And yes, I'm passionate about that. But more than that, what I'm really looking for them to do is be that beacon that helps them see that life is not over.
Sure.
To make sure that they know that they still have worth, they still have value when the world, you know, we called it, Walter, not we, I'd say me, I was part of the group, but it was the group that was up on the wards. They would say when the new person came in from the battlefield in the fight and they're all banged up and everything, hey man, you're a rock star for a year. because everything what happened was you had the congressional leadership, you had the Washington cheerleaders, you got an Xbox, you got all these things. Everybody started giving all this stuff to the service members, but the real deal is what happens when they leave that hospital.
Right, when they go home.
They're sitting across from their wife or their husband and their spouse for the first time and their children, and they don't have all those bells and whistles because the Washington Redskin cheerleaders are not coming in there and Congress is not coming to their house.
Right.
What do they do at that point? That's when the rubber really meets the road of what this life is going to be like when that support system that they've been used to in the military is gone. And that's where I wanted our programs to really help in that space to make them more resilient. Because in resilience, we think that resilience is kind of like the rubber band, it snaps back to its original shape. But as you know, it doesn't. What if my rubber band broke, like in my case with my artificial leg,
Right.
or I got tremendous pain and my rubber band is broke? How do I show resilience in that area? And that's, again, it's a very personal level. Whereas I can say that in the word resilience, how I break it down is there are 10 letters. And those 10 letters represent maybe 10 hurdles in a hurdle race that I run. Every hurdle race has 10 hurdles. And before the race has even begun, before the race starts, there is an announcer or the starter who will say, "Quiet for the start." And embedded in the word resilience, if you look there, is the word silence.
Oh, wow.
We have to begin to hear our own voices first.
Sure.
That's when we can choose to amputate that fear that's holding us back. Maybe it's 86ing some of our friends. Maybe it's, turning off the televisions to stop feeding our mind negativity. Maybe it's some type of meditation that we need to do. But we got to center ourselves for that journey on the side of where we're going up to that resolute state. So for me, you can hear the words and the difference between people who are not there and those who are.
Right.
If you're in a state of rebuilding, you'll find people saying words like, "Can't wait till we get back to normal. I can't wait to, I can't wait till normal happens again. I just want things to be the way they were."
Right.
That's a person who is trying to redefine their moment. They're stuck in that moment. They're wrestling with how this new process is. The words you hear on the other side are words of empowerment for that person's self and trying to bring others along. So case in point, when I won the silver medal in Sydney, Australia in the long jump, after 20 years of work, of training and doing all these things, I come down the elevator and I have my medal. I got it right beside me here. I have my silver medal, right? It's hung around my neck. And at that time, Lucas Christian, I'm kind of holding it like this. And Lucas Christian, who beats me by, about 7-8 centimeters, he says, "It feels good, doesn't it?" And I said, "Yeah, it feels really, it's heavy, it's good." And it represented 20 years of work. And this is earned hardware, right? So it's not like I lost the gold. It's not like I was going for the silver medal, but at the same time, I can honor first place, second place, third place. But the point I want to make with that is when I get off the elevator, a reporter who recognizes me from my days at Arkansas, she says, "Hey, John, congratulations with artificial limb technology. Do you think you could go back to Arkansas and run against the Michael Johnsons and jump against the Carl Lewises?" And I thought about her question for a moment. And this is where the resolve comes in.
Right.
And I said, "No, I don't think I could. I don't think with artificial limb technology I could do that." However, maybe the question should be reframed or rephrased as, if God forbid Carl Lewis or Michael Johnson lost a limb, could they run as fast or jump as far as I do?
Right.
And that's the catch up. That's where when we have those moments, I don't need to be validated by anybody else. You need to come to where I am so that we can actually move on together and get on this side. If you can't handle it, then that's okay. But I'm still going to move on, whether or not you're with me or not.
Yeah. Well, I think it's great. That resiliency. I mean, exactly right. I mean, these people are very resilient. I mean, a lot of people with invisible disabilities. And you talk about, I mean, there is a new normal in a sense, right? And I think that we need to learn in society that new normal is not that the person is going to be the CEO. We always have, I mean, you look at a lot of organizations and it's like, the 5 people, these are all the people that live with such and such illness. And look at them, CEO of this and mountain climber this. And it's like, Yeah, but that's not the majority of people. The majority of people are like, hey, we're getting through each day. We're trying to figure out things. You know, some people are able to figure out an ability to go back and work. Some people are not, right? But for them, the working is each day, right? And so I think that I love what you're saying, though. It is a new normal, right? And we got to forget that the new normal is their new normal, not our new normal.
Well, but there's a new normal for everybody.
Right.
But here's how I define the new normal. So new to me, when my wife told me, so we're on the playground, I'm bawling my eyes out when I first lost my leg, and I'm crying, and snot's coming out my nose, and all this stuff is happening because I'm thinking about my fears.
Right.
And of her possibly leaving me, or my son not seeing me as his dad.
Sure.
And then she comes running over and says, what is going on? I began to articulate to her all my fears I had in my head. And she said, you know what? We're going to get through this together, John. It's just our new normal.
Well, that's awesome.
So in 1994, she says that to me, and that baseline my entire existence. Right. John Jr., kind of sometime later, he jumps off the swing, hits the ground. He's 5 years old, comes running over those little 5-year-old legs, says, hey, Dad, you see my big jump? You see my big jump, Dad? And he splits between myself and my wife, Alice. And I recognized in those 15 yards he had just run from the swing set to me and Alice that he had just validated me as his father and created his new normal. And the new normal, therefore, is not a destination. It's not a place that we get and we land and we stop.
Right, right.
It's a plateau. So we get to the no normal. It's a plateau to grow. So we've learned some experiences, and we keep on elevating from that the platform. So the ceiling becomes the floor, and we can elevate from there.
Wow, fantastic. Well, so this is a question we love to ask here. The show's called Invisible Courage for a reason, and that courage is, you only need courage when you're going through something difficult. When everything's great, you don't need courage. I mean, that's just like sailing or whatever, right? So on your darkest days, and I know you have those darkest days, and there's some times where, there's a lot of, what is that one thing that helps you get through today? Because, COVID's flattened everybody. We're all isolated. We're all alone. And we like to say in Invisible Disabilities is we don't want to forget those people that have been isolating for 20 years before COVID, and they're going to be doing it afterwards. We don't want to forget them. We've all felt it now. We need to remember that, right? But what is the one thing that gets you through one day? Not this will pass or any of those things, but get you through one day. What is that?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and it used to be kind of a lot of different answers as I began to unpack my entire life of what's been the single thread that's been through it is faith.
Wow.
And I'll be very specific with that. A person asked me, what's the most important thing about your business when I was doing the veteran entrepreneurship class, and we gave her all these different answers, and she said, no. So the most important thing to do is to ask yourself the question, how are you going to dispose of your business? How are you going to dispose of it? How are you going to wrap it up? And I said, oh, wow, because that means that things have been successful. So for my life, after 6 months, I thought about her statement. I said, what do I want at the end of my life? And I wanted my God to say to me, well done, my good and faithful servant, enter into the joy of my rest. Right. And so because of that, I began to maneuver all of my life to align to that purpose. So every single day, that new normal for me is making sure that I'm showing up in people's lives as the most positive force that I can be, and not holding, grudges, not trying to hold anything else. I'm not saying I get it right every time. What I'm saying, that is a very intentional thing that I'm doing, because the inspirational value that I used to reject is the thing that is really creating the change in other individuals, because I show up so powerfully on the resolve side, because I know exactly where my destination is going to right now.
Yeah, you
so
care.
Inspiration, I believe, is really the catalyst to motivation. Motivation causes actions. Actions lead us to transformation results, and those results, they re-inspire us or allow other people who are watching the process to catch the vision. So that's my answer for that question.
Well, you know what I love about it? The reality is that you care, right? And that's, we have lost caring, but what's interesting about COVID is it's brought us back to this point to think about what is real, what really matters, right?
Absolutely.
And the whole world's going through it at the same time,
Yes.
So I'll tell you, that's fantastic. And I really so appreciate you being part of the show. Tell us where we can learn more about John Register.
Wow, I'm all over social media. So if you go, the best place to probably find me is just on my website, which is johnregister.com. But I'm on LinkedIn. So reach out to me there. I'm on Instagram and on YouTube.
Awesome.
So I'm all over the place. I think those are the best places to find me. And we always are talking about how we help others, like you were saying, Wayne, to push through those challenges and those fears that they have, because that story that you come out with on the other side is going to release somebody else.
Right. That's what I call hope. Hope is not hope that there's a cure. Hope is that humanity, we're able to help each other in the middle of what we're going through. That's real true hope. So, well, thank you so much for being here today. We're thrilled to have you on Invisible InCourage Live. And we'll hopefully, we love to see you more involved with Invisible Disabilities. We're hoping we can get you involved in that as well. So thank you so much today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Wayne.